Hi, I'm Derek. Welcome to the stream. This is our pre-show where we talk about things that are ongoing in the news or whatever happens to be on our minds. In a few, we're going to get into the real show where we'll be broadcasting on television, and we're inviting you to stay, as always, for the post-show right back here on the web, where we'll be getting deeper into some of the issues that were raised. I'm not even going to introduce our guests because we know who we are. We'll save the introduction for broadcast, but Azita, it's great to see you as always. So there are a couple of things that have been buzzing in the news this weekend, one of which is that the world, surprisingly and shockingly, did not come to an end on Saturday. Now, this has completely blown my mind. I mean, I didn't pay my rent. I was just like, you know, I sat on the beach all day. And once again, as usual, the world is still here. And one of the things I'm wondering, to be more serious about, is what makes people believe in this stuff? Like, why do people get caught up in this idea that somehow the end is nigh and they know when it's coming?
I think a big part of that is that America especially has a sense of buying into a fear-based belief. It's easier to buy into something that's fear-based and it repels faster across than something that might not be. So
I had to Wikipedia. Everyone was like, the rapture. The rapture was like 2012. And they were like, no, the rapture. Like, no, before. Yeah, so I Wikipedia'd it and still don't really get it. Yeah.
What do religious people do, though? It's almost like, do you get a refund? Like, what do you do
I
after?
tweeted the same thing on Saturday. I was like, okay, so, you know, world's supposed to end at 6 o'clock on Saturday. It doesn't. Yeah. You show up at church on Sunday. Do you get a refund? And the answer is probably no.
No.
Yeah.
Not so much.
No, and it's funny because I was reading this article about how many people, how many times have created massive stirs around this idea of the world coming to an end. And the funniest thing is they were saying, oh, well, it's because of these earthquakes and storms, and look at the storms, and look at what happened, tsunami in Japan, and storms in the Midwest, and look at all of this, and Chile and Haiti, and et cetera, Pakistan. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, for the storms and such, maybe climate change could be an issue.
Yeah, contributing factor.
Contributing factor. The same people who swear to God the earth is coming to an end don't consider climate change to be real.
Well, that would just be too much work.
That would be too much work. I mean, we can blame it on God, but as far as we taking personal responsibility, that's a whole other ballgame.
But it's what you guys are talking about, like this mirror aspect. Like, you know, a lot of the news is always about things going bad, because when things go bad, it attracts attention. So things have been going bad for a long time, but now you can find out about it, you know, instantaneously, essentially. And so that's why people,
I think it was also comedic humor. Like, there was a huge comedic relief that came out of the rapture thing, and it became really funny really quickly, which is good and it's bad, because it just kind of spiraled into something that maybe didn't deserve as much attention as it got worldwide.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, that was the thing. I mean, everyone got caught up in making jokes about it, but it's also, it's two things that are interesting. One is that, you know, people, I think, who believed in it want to find some answer to the complexity of the world. Like, everything is so hard now, maybe this is a simple way to comprehend. But people who don't believe in it were enjoying the comic relief of like, okay, well, with all the issues on the planet, maybe we can make fun of these folks for a minute. And speaking of issues of the planet, actually, there's one I want to bring up before we do. I want to check our Skype guest. Roosevelt, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
How's kicks in Kampala?
Good.
Excellent.
What? Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be coming to you in just a little bit to get some more insight into what happened today. So thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to talking.
No, I can't.
Cool. So one of the things that was a little bit more serious that people have been talking about is this whole speech that Obama gave last Thursday. We were live tweeting it. We had some comments about it. And then you saw Netanyahu meet with Obama on Friday in D.C. Obama spoke to AIPAC on Sunday.
Right here.
And now Netanyahu is about to speak to AIPAC, which is the American-Israeli Political Affairs Committee. He's speaking to them today. Biggest Israeli lobby in the United States. So here's the thing
Jewish lobby.
Well, it's pro-Israeli lobby, because there are other Jewish organizations that do different things.
You're right. Call them interchangeable.
Yeah. But so they're not interchangeable, basically. But the thing is, on Friday, I don't know if you guys saw the press conference between Obama and Netanyahu, or with them.
Where he was staring him straight in the eye.
Netanyahu was dead up in his grill, and it seemed to be...
Dead up.
Yeah, dead up, and he was like lecturing to him. And I was like, you know, this is the president of the United States. Like the U.S. or not, this is an influential dude, and you're treating him like a schoolboy for what?
He's dismissing everything Obama had stated in the Middle East speech, and kind of just basically saying, that's not going to work. The Palestinians need to understand that's not going to work. I mean, what was your, on Al Jazeera, we have someone who wrote about it saying that, the way that we've categorized it, so to speak, or that we're representing it, is U.S. support for Israel is ironclad.
Right.
So essentially unwavering.
Yeah. But Netanyahu apparently doesn't feel it's ironing up.
And this tape is wrong. Yeah, what do you think, quickly, Azita? Any takeaways from either speech? Or the speech today in Ireland?
I think that it's really interesting when there's these like public outspoken moments where things are said, but most importantly, I think it's more the after effects. It's easy to speak, but it's mostly what actually takes place afterwards. I mean, speaking is easy, and if you're a good public speaker, you're a good public speaker.
No, I mean, so many people were like, yeah, I'm not feeling it because nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest question, and the thing that precipitated this, but some of it is the whole Arab revolutions that have been happening in the last few months.
Right.
But I think some of it is also the Palestinian statement that they're going to push for nationhood or at least for recognition of the state at the UN in September. And that's going to complicate the entire quote unquote peace process. If not for that, I don't think that the president might have made such a strong statement on Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And additionally, he was like, Palestinians need to stop this process. Well, that says to me, if I'm looking at it as a Palestinian negotiator, well, you need to press it because obviously it's at least precipitating some action. I think people are so fed up, like
with rhetoric.
Yeah, rhetoric. And the thing is, it's like we'll talk all day. Nothing's going to change. The status quo benefits one of the parties more than the other.
Right.
And so it's in their interest not to make peace.
Well, Lamise Andoni wrote an interesting article where she's saying in his latest speech, this is how she summed it up: Obama's thinly veiled rhetoric proves he'll do anything to satisfy his pro-Israeli voter base. And it's funny because I know today, during his speech in Ireland, a lot of people were joking, oh, well, this is the launch of his campaign speech. He just spoke to AIPAC. There's the Jewish vote, the Jewish lobby, rather. So,
we unfortunately, we got to wrap it up at that point, but we're going to come back to this issue if we want to later in the post show. Thanks for joining us. We're about to go live on air. We'll see you in just a few. Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in The Stream, a social media community with its own daily TV show. We're bringing you stories that are ongoing, global, and sourced from social media. Today, Honk to Help. Ugandan motorists join protests against high food and fuel prices. And how some African social media networks are managing to compete with Facebook and Twitter. As always, our digital producer, Ahmed Shihab Eldin, is here. Also joining us on the couch is Azita Ardakani. She's the founder of Love Social, an organization whose work in social media has drawn the attention of the United Nations and the Academy Awards. Azita, welcome. Tell us a little bit about what Love Social does.
Of course. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. I started Love Social in December of 2009. It was based on the premise that you can bring people together on corporate campaigns as well as cause-based campaigns on things that matter. And we've done some great work with the UN after the Pakistan flood, as well as we did some work for Oscar-nominated documentary Gasland, which is focused on hydraulic fracturing, which we've talked about before.
Well, you've said some really interesting things to me before we got on the air about how people think about changing, how social media can be applied to that. So I want to jump into today's issues. I'm really looking forward to getting your ideas because we're covering a lot of that type of thing today in particular. Before we get into the topics of the day, Ahmed, what are some of the things that people have been saying to us online?
Well, today we got a tweet coming from Saudi Arabia from a lady named Nawara82. And it's interesting to note she's saying another lady was arrested today in Saudi for driving. So people not familiar with the story might wonder why it's another lady. Well, on Saturday, a woman was detained for trying to launch an internet campaign, essentially trying to, go against the ban against Saudi women driving. So this woman, you know, was an affluent woman. She was arrested on Saturday. And she was trying to protest, and so she was
online. She was an online.
Yeah,
protest.
she was an online protest, but she actually drove and then filmed herself
Right.
and then uploaded it and started a campaign. But this new link that we got today from Nawara is chronicling a woman who's in her 40s who was detained going to the grocery store. She was driving this pickup truck right here, and you know, she essentially uses this truck to go and pick up because she doesn't have a brother or you know a father, and she can't afford to take taxis. So that really highlights, you know, this new arrest highlights the fact that, you know, aside from protesting, some women essentially need to drive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because with the first video, I wonder, was she filming herself while she was driving?
She was with an activist.
She was with an activist filming her. Okay.
A young activist.
A young activist. Well, I think that there are a lot of youth using these platforms to kind of drive, like we were saying, drive change in the ways that they want to see the world. And I know that there's some other stuff that's been coming to us from other parts of Europe.
We've been speaking about this, you know, Spaniard protest story, so to speak. People protesting in Spain. It started as an impromptu camp sit-in outside the Puerta del Sol, but we had a tweet today coming using the hashtag Spanish Revolution that sent us to this website. It's SpanishRevolution.eu. It's basically live streaming from Spain. So people are using their mobile phones to live stream what's actually going on. Right. And there's been protests across the world, you know, showing solidarity with the Spaniards and the movement to kind of, you know, fight against, you know, these bank austerity measures and the corruption. As you can see right here, this map, you know, there shows that there's people, they're claiming 700 places over the world are revolutioning.
Right.
And they also have online campers, people in Japan, as you can see right here, there's about 80 people gathered in Japan, across the world, even in Egypt. You know, we tie it back to Egypt. You always joke that I bring it back to Egypt, but we have it, you know.
Because you do.
Yeah, people using the hashtag January 25th on a serious note and Spanish Revolution saying this started in Tahrir. What do you make of all this? Is this the 60s happening all over again?
It's really funny because when you show these maps and these geolocations of all these things taking place, it's almost like the internet is serving as this massive mirror and it's highlighting extra activity. So as people almost get this positive reconfirmation that they're allowed, it gives permission. When you know someone else is doing it, you feel stronger. It's one thing when people are sitting in a room, it's another thing if you know that room is almost being aired and you feel just like a person on stage without an audience is not going to perform.
Well, we have an audience right here, and you know, speaking of this story, we really want to be following this story. We're going to be talking about Spain more tomorrow, so if you have any information about this story or if you have any other stories you want to share with us, remember you can tweet us at AJStream.
At the New America Foundation's Open Technology and Media Policy Initiative, and I'm in the stream.
Make some noise. That seems to be the new mantra for Ugandans sick and tired of the rising cost of living in their country. For weeks, thousands of people have been walking to work to draw attention to the high price of food and fuel. Now, Ugandan motorists have taken matters into their own hands, literally. This is a story that we started following actually during our pilot phase. Before we were on television, we've been looking at this Ugandan Walk to Work campaign. And the basic issue is that rising inflation has made the cost of food and fuel prohibitive to many Ugandans. And people have said, well, if our brethren cannot afford to drive to work, we're all going to walk to work. And so the protests, it's not like what happened in Spain where they camped out. It's not like what happened in Egypt where they took over Tahrir Square. These people are literally just marching. Many of them actually marching to get to their places of business. And the government has cracked down significantly. They've arrested opposition leaders. Currently, one of the key opposition leaders, Basiji, is under house arrest. We saw before he was shot in the hand with rubber bullets. As you can see from Ahmed's screen, we see images of police, or actually military, chasing after people, and we've heard that the violence has been escalating. There's even been attempts by the government to censor platforms like Facebook and Twitter, which people have been using to mobilize. So one of the things that we found out is that today, activists were being asked to actually honk their horns at 5 p.m. Uganda time, that's GMT plus 3 hours, to honk their horns for 5 minutes. And if they weren't in a car, they didn't have a thing, blow a vuvuzela, make a noise,
hit a
something.
Pot and pan,
exactly, hit a pot and pan, something to give, raise awareness that they want change from the leader Museveni.
Right.
One of the things that I found really interesting as we were researching this is that the price of gas per gallon is $5.50.
Right.
So people in the United States are flipping out because gas prices are over $4
Right.
here. Uganda is ranked one of the poorest nations in the world, and people are still being forced to pay $5.50. It brings to question, how long is this sustainable? Joining us to discuss this from the Ugandan capital, Kampala, is blogger and multimedia journalist Rosabel Kagumire. Rosabel, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you so much.
So, Rosabel, tell us about today's activity. What happened at 5 p.m.?
So at 5 p.m. in the capital Kampala, mostly in the center, it was a little bit slow to catch up in the rest of the city, but in the center, in the middle of the markets, people were blowing whatever they had, whether it's a whistle or a vuvuzela. For those who drive, they were honking, and we have a lot of public motorcycles called boda boda, so they're very, very well known. So those two are part of the campaign to honk and let the government hear, because part of the issue was that the walk to work campaigners, people behind this campaign, said that they had seen a lot of deaths. They have seen a lot of destruction, property, because of the response of the government. So they wanted to change a strategy that could involve more people, especially those Ugandans who are well off, but they are not happy with the situation, but they want to do something. They think that this is a much broader campaign than walk to work, because
Now,
walk to work involved a lot of risks.
Rosabel, let me ask you, because you've brought up that great point of there have been lots of risks involved. We know that many people have been injured. We know that there's been a significant crackdown by security forces. What is the goal of both Walk to Work and the Honk campaign? What are you hoping to achieve?
I think the people behind this campaign want to see government do something about it, because when they raised the issue of, they said we are going to walk to work to protest high fuel prices, high food prices, and all the prices of goods. The first reaction we had from the government wasn't that we are going to do something about it. It was something that we are going to crush those who are dissenting. You know, it became political issue rather than an issue that affects everybody. So I think the campaigners, truly what they want to do here is to ask, to have the government address the issues that are affecting the people.
What can the government do, though? Because just to play the other side for a minute, you know, the price of fuel is determined on a global level. Food prices are rising around the world. What can the Ugandan government do to address those issues?
So people who are behind this protest are seeing a government that is not very responsible, because we have seen our government spend on fighter jets. We have seen our government spend a lot of money on the swearing-in ceremony. We have seen we have the third largest cabinet in the world. You know, we have a lot of public spending. We are putting money that is not making more money. We are not seeing any investment in agriculture. One of the problems is food security here. Food prices are high, yet our food is being sold in South Sudan, in DRC, at a very good price for Ugandan farmers. But this leaves Ugandan families in hunger. So the campaigners are saying that government must be seen to do something about the agriculture, the investment.
Now, I want to ask you one other thing, sorry, just to jump in, because we did get a comment from Julian Nabunya, and she said that I think Uganda, this is on our website, she says, I think Uganda needs more organized ideology to protest against Museveni's 30 years regime. Basically what she's saying is, well, you can protest about the food and fuel prices, but let's say that the prices come down. What happens then? Is there a call for regime change there, or are people satisfied with the current government and just want them to do things differently?
I don't think that the things here, people are satisfied, but we also realize that we have just gone through an election February 18th, and the swearing in was last week. So we don't expect our president to be, you know, toppled the Mubarak way, but we are, what people are asking on the ground is seeing reforms. They do not, of course, in the end, they want this regime that has stayed, that is going into 3 decades, to be able to transition power peacefully. That is one of the major issues, that when the government came out to attack protesters who are not armed at all, and we have people dying, we have pregnant women being shot in the stomach, people were afraid that we are going back to the dark days of Idi Amin. And that has been a center of the argument, that what we have seen, then we need to go beyond just talking about the food, but talking about how will we transition peacefully from this 30-year regime. It's also part of the argument, of course.
So, Azita, I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think happens? It seems like in all of these places where people are expressing dissent and the government has a significant crackdown, it's almost as if the crackdown creates additional dissent.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, it's like anything like mercury. If you divide it, it kind of, multiplies. Yeah. It's the same situation here. And what I think is really interesting is when it comes to a matter of nutrition, if you take away the basic ability for people to have energy, yeah. It's a very, very in-your-face way and to demobilize people because they're going to be lethargic ultimately. Yeah. And it's really funny without actual mobility in terms of getting to where you need to go and physical mobility in terms of having energy through nutrition and sustenance, how are people supposed to speak up against?
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's so many protests happening around the world. It's important to note that, Besigye clarified that he's not trying to overthrow the government, and yet still, Museveni is cracking down and preventing.
And Besigye is basically the opposition leader who has been one of the key organizers of this and who came in second, a distant second in these elections.
And then he had to flee to Kenya. But the reason I mention this is because, still we see that, leaders are not learning, so to speak, and, or I don't know if it's fair to say that, but, Museveni has not allowed Facebook and Twitter he's prevented Facebook and Twitter from, being used to promote, what's happening with the protests. So I just wonder, based on that, go ahead.
Yeah, they were using, I believe they stopped, they're still using tear gas in places, but they were using, paint because it would deactivate phones and hurt cameras. And if you take away these devices that can capture and do what we talked about earlier, which is allow the dissemination.
Pink stuff.
Exactly.
Actually spraying people with that pink.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting tweet you've got
there.
there.
Maggie Water is asking, and it's to your point about, how is this all playing out? Increasing connectivity has created more informed citizens. So does that perpetuate, government accountability or their actions? Does that perpetuate voices of dissent?
Rosebell?
I believe that people, if you see that the use of Facebook and Twitter right now in Uganda, opposition politicians who are kind of youthful, who appeal to the youthful population in Uganda, are using these tools to reach out, say, come to walk and work. When Besigye came back from Nairobi, he had thousands of young people lining up on the road from the airport to receive him. And these people were informed through Facebook. And what has been very challenging was that the government has not used these social media tools to put maybe a counter campaign to all this, but they have moved against traditional media like radio, which is a big issue in this country.
Let me ask you, actually, we have to go, and I want to ask you to come back and join us during the post-show because we want to continue this conversation. But before we let you go, I do have one quick question. We know that internet penetration is relatively limited across the African continent, including in Uganda. How are you able to mobilize so many people when everyone does not have access to the web?
I think the people who are mostly in this are in urban areas. So there is a link, of course, between traditional media and new media, and people who are tweeting, journalists like me. When I'm in the field, I put on my Twitter what I've just seen, and maybe somebody else will use a phone to inform somebody. So we have 10% penetration of internet, those who use the internet. So it's not big yet, but those who have, people have seen that we can actually use the internet, and the few who have been there are now using it to mobilize and also to know what is going on in the country.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosebell. We appreciate you joining us. Remember, if you want to share your stories with us, tweet us at AJStream. You can also send us a text at the number at the bottom of your screen.
Salam Ismaman Alias, Roznamagarastam, and I'm in the stream.
Competing against Facebook and Twitter isn't easy, as social media outlets around the world have found out. But in Africa, some have managed to stay afloat by embracing the most popular form of communication on the continent. And this is part of the reason why I was asking this last question of Rosebell, because what winds up happening in a lot of places is, although you don't have significant internet penetration, you have massive mobile penetration. And right now, the number of mobile devices on the African continent is greater than in North America. Yeah. A lot of people are not aware of the degree of penetration there, but I think it's really starting to shift the way that people communicate, and therefore the way in which they're able to organize and express their values. I'm wondering, what do you think about this, Azita? Perhaps Africa is leapfrogging the traditional methodologies for using broadband because of the lack of access of broadband. And maybe that comes a place where you can see greater innovation happening online, or at least on mobile devices, than you're seeing in other territories.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an exponential effect if you introduce mobile, and as soon as you have multiple people doing it, you're going to see massive growth. The problem there becomes if there is a disconnect between the time that kind of mobile movement happens prior to what we've talked about, it might become a fragmented effort because you're only getting kind of sound bites of information as opposed to like a thorough understanding of the issues taking place.
Exactly. Well, you know, it's interesting because I think that soundbite issue is something that's happening to us around the world. But at the same time, it's funny because although people are maybe getting only small bits of information, they're getting access to a lot more information.
Which might not be a good thing because it might not be totally legitimate or totally honest.
We don't know. It's not always
does not necessarily, you know, equate to a positive thing or an educated foundation of information. It just might be more, and you might have more to filter through.
And there's always risks. But, you know, very quickly to your point, Derek, I just wanted to highlight, you know, that even though internet penetration in Africa is the lowest continent, as you might imagine, which is 10%, internet growth is 2,400%, which is the highest out of obviously any continent. So, you know, it's quite interesting, that disparity.
I was doing a research project with a mobile company a couple of years ago, and one of the fastest growing areas for mobile internet was obviously Africa. Africa and Asia were the two big ones. And so we want to get a little bit more into what's happening with some of these social networks. We've got joining us now via Skype from Cape Town, Vincent Mara, who calls himself the co-founder and technical ninja of MoTribe, a social mobile platform. Vincent, welcome to the stream.
Hi, Derek.
Hey, it's great to have you, man. You're our first ninja that has been on the air. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with the development of mobile technologies on the continent and how the uptake is compared with traditional social networking.
Well, I think when you get out on the streets, you realize that a lot of the sort of theorizing about how mobile is really empowering individuals in Africa comes to life. When you see everybody with a mobile phone, in many African countries, we're approaching 100% mobile penetration. You know, so suddenly the power of the internet comes with these devices, and you see it being used in all sorts of different contexts. There's some massive social networks like Mixit. Our social network is growing, and it's just an incredibly powerful thing to see how people are adopting so rapidly and not giving much thought to the fact that they don't have PCs.
You know, I think this is so fascinating because what you're saying in a nutshell is in a way, they've leapfrogged the usage platforms or the usage sort of techniques and practices in certain other parts of the world. And I can say, you know, even for myself being from Ghana, my grandmother had a cell phone before I did. Everyone in our crowd was using SMS when cats in New York and LA didn't know what SMS was. Do people think of this from, and speaking to you as an entrepreneur and for other entrepreneurs in your community, do you see this as an opportunity to be building platforms that are global in scope, or are you primarily doing things or seeing projects that are targeted for African communities?
Either way you look at it, it's an absolutely massive opportunity. Just in Africa alone, there are so many people who are desperate for new services that speak to them on a local level, something that can touch them on a national or on a city level will make huge differences. And I think the market's wide open. One of the things that we really struggle with as entrepreneurs in Africa is access to funding, to venture capital, and that aspect of I guess the entire industry is not as well developed as you would find in North America and Europe. You know, and a lot of people would argue that that's one of the things that's potentially holding African social networks back from growing, is simply that there's not enough confidence on an investment level to invest in these new properties and products.
This is really intriguing. I was at an event in January in Manhattan, and I met a guy there who I had run into at a TED conference in Tanzania a couple of years ago, TED Global. And I was talking to him about an investment that he made in an African mobile software company. And he was talking about, well, he had invested this money, and because that same company was saying exactly what Vincent had said, it was hard for them to get funding on the ground. This New York investor put money in there. And then he started talking like, it was going pretty well. And then I saw this other company that was creating a competing service The first one was in Ghana. The second one was out of Cote d'Ivoire.
Right.
So I invested in them too. It turns out I knew both of the entrepreneurs that he invested in, but it's really interesting. Azita, does this offer potentially an opportunity when we think about development? Maybe we should be thinking about it differently. Maybe we shouldn't be looking at all the aid that can be given to Africa, but we should be looking at more opportunities to support entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. I think that allowing individual, just like we support individual governance, and that's taking this, there's this movement of microactivity, and in that movement of microactivity, if we can support entrepreneurs, especially in technology in these areas, they can speak to their issues a lot more authentically than anyone else really can. So allowing these people to kind of be activated and do this can really propel direction and action into a real direction for that area.
Vincent, when you're looking for yourself as an entrepreneur, what is your hope for the possibilities for technology to shift things happening on the ground?
Well, Derek, the one thing that I think most people in Africa know is that we've got bigger problems to solve, or at least they feel bigger. So we've had to deal with lack of infrastructure, lack of funding, lack of confidence in general. So the hope is that over time, there are going to be new sort of hubs of technology innovation, and they're already popping up in Nairobi. There's the iHub in Cape Town, there's Silicon Cape, and Lagos is pumping. So there are amazing things happening on the continent, and I think that it's quite hard to sort of bracket the entire continent into one category and say that, you know, mostly we should be looking at helping poor people. It's actually about helping industry build. And people in the technology industry in Africa are incredibly innovative just because of the challenges that they're faced with.
Vincent, I just have a quick question I want to get in. It's not a question coming from a user, but Gal Masenji is saying it seems like the internet will take many African incumbents out of power. So I just want to throw quickly to you or Azita, anybody. You know, we've seen African leaders, like the South African leader now Zuma is on Twitter. Nigeria's good luck Jonathan is also using Twitter and is among the world's, like, you know, most prominent leaders.
He's second up to Barack Obama. I understand, for his Facebook page.
Yeah, and now even Rwanda's Paul Kagame is having arguments on Twitter. So, I mean, we've talked about from the activist side. What about from the government side? How are they using these tools?
So my perspective, I did a little bit of maths. President Kagame's got 0.15% of the Rwandan population following him already on Twitter, right? If he keeps going for another couple of years, he could have enough to swing an election if he gets in trouble. And I think that's a really important point.
Right. So to that point, I actually want to get deeper into that issue. Unfortunately, we're out of time during the broadcast segment, but Vincent, I'm going to ask you to stay there. We're going to bring Rosabelle back. Azita, I want to thank you for joining us today. I know you're going to be back with us again tomorrow. If you're tuning in on air, you can join us now at stream.aljazeera.com, where we'll be continuing the conversation, and you can always tweet us at AJStream. We'll see you online. Hi, and welcome to the Post Show. This is where we get a chance to go deeper into the issues that we raised during the broadcast. Right now, we're having a conversation about what's going on with the evolution of mobile technology on the African continent. We've got Vincent Mara joining us, and we also have from Cape Town, we have Rosabelle Kagumire in Kampala. And I actually want to get you in on this, Rosabelle. What are you seeing with the possibilities for entrepreneurship in the technology space in Uganda?
Because right now in Uganda we have 5 telecom companies, and they've done a good job in terms of getting people on online. For example, we have Facebook, which is free on certain mobile lines. So and we have 5 telecoms, and there's still so much space. It's only 10% penetration of internet, and we only have 10 million Ugandans with mobile phones. So there is still a very big gap there. so many people can feel.
Roosevelt, just FYI, something just happened to the framing of your Skype. I'm not sure. We're missing part of your face. Okay, it's coming a little more clear there. But basically, the point you're making is that there's still a lot of opportunity for growth and expansion. And this is so true. This is one of the things. I'll tell you personally, I feel like there's a sort of a skewed perspective when you talk to African entrepreneurs. They will tell you that so many billions of dollars go into the sort of aid sector.
Right.
Like we have to help Africans. Africans are poor. We need to give people food, et cetera. And it's always Africans as a whole because the continent is just one big country. And the interesting thing is you then have much smaller equity markets when people are looking to get capital to make investments. But Africa still gives the highest return on foreign direct investment of any place on the planet. And as Roosevelt just pointed out, there's so much capacity. There's so much to be done, so much still to be built. I'm wondering, why is it, do you think, that the perspective with Africa is always on what is missing as opposed to the opportunities that are there?
I think it's tricky because if you're on one hand singing a song about aid and necessary of basic things that need to help them, and on the other hand you're like, they're entrepreneurs, they're building out these things. Well, the common assumption is that if you're able to build out really intelligent technologies, you're okay. You might not actually need those basic nutritional things of a Maslow's hierarchy that allows you to build technology. So I think if you start entering the support realm of entrepreneurism, people are going to think that they don't need aid anymore. Well, so how do you approach it from a holistic perspective?
That's exactly what happens. And basically you actually have a very refined industry on the aid side, although I have lots of critiques of it. I mean, significant percentages of the money that's allegedly going to aid winds up going to consultants and people to help you figure out what to do with the money, who are typically not hired from the country on the ground. They're brought in from outside because their expertise is needed more so than the people who actually live there. And so what winds up happening is you have all this money that comes into aid in Africa. Very relatively small amounts actually get to aiding the people. And my argument is, I look at people like Vincent, I look at the work that he's doing, I look at the kind of insights that Roosevelt's bringing us, and I'm like, well, if you invested in them and the kind of work that they do, wouldn't they be dealing with the stuff that is going on the ground in their homeland?
Yeah, and it's interesting to note, like, we might be agreeing with you, Vincent, but even on the social networking realm, people are agreeing with you. They're saying you're right. Startup investing in Africa and related culture and infrastructure is lacking, even though there are these huge opportunities. So what about like actually integrating with the big kind of giants in this field? Like, for example, certain local African networks or local startups working with Google and the Facebooks and the Twitters. How important is that?
It's very important. In fact, in Cape Town, Google have just announced that they're launching something similar to like a Y Combinator type model. So seed investment for tech startups. So Google is getting involved. And I think that in various different areas, we're starting to see it happen now. But it just feels like it's taken very long, and it would be good if this really started accelerating a lot faster, because I can tell you the first thing that we did when we got investment is we started looking for people to hire, right? So immediately you're creating employment that's sustainable and long-term, that continues to add value to the workforce.
I think an interesting point to that, though, is obviously North America being kind of the starting point of a lot of these technologies, as Facebook and Twitter, et cetera. If the valuation of sale of these properties gets so high, like a LinkedIn at 4 times its valuation or whatever, and this bubble bursts, what happens? Like we're building up and holding these things on a pedestal, but we're also driving a potential crisis in terms of how we value them.
I think that's a great question. I think it depends on what the technology is, right? So for example, if it's like a traditional social network where we're hopefully trying to drive revenue through advertising, then who knows? But some of these platforms are actually drawing revenue from a variety of different areas. With some of the people I've seen doing things like mobile payments, one of the challenges on the African continent right now is a lot of people are unbanked, what they say, right? You don't have a bank account, you don't have the checking account, et cetera, you don't have access. But everybody and their mother has got a cell phone. So when you start talking about mobile payments and the ability to transfer banking from the traditional model to a new model, one that hasn't even permeated that thoroughly in the West yet, then even if you were to have a burst in the markets, you would still have such demand for those services that I think you could still have people using them. And I actually want to get Roosevelt's insights in this, because Roosevelt, we've been talking with you a lot about what you want to see with changes on the ground with regard to the reduction of food prices in Uganda, reduction of fuel prices. But what are some of the things that you want to see with the advancement of entrepreneurship and the business sector there?
Of course, you just mentioned the mobile money. It's very, very famous here because people don't have bank accounts, yet they want to conduct business. They have little money to conduct business. So they need simpler alternatives, not first world alternatives. But also, people are looking to using technology to solve certain problems. We are not seeing much investment going into e-health. You have not you have few projects. Someone being able to diagnose a person and tell you this is what is going on. What can we do? Can we refer this patient or not? And the issue of health and healthcare breakdown is what takes a lot of money from most Ugandans. As far as I know, we pay our own money, even though you have government hospitals, there is no medicine there. So you have to buy your own medicine no matter where you are. So people want to see this eased, if we can use technology for people to know where can I get this, where can I find this. And people have, almost every village right now in Uganda has a mobile phone, and people tend to depend on each other. So we have to go beyond just normal business technology, but also investing technology that is going to help so many who are in need, especially in health and also in agriculture.
Rosebell, that's interesting, and I don't mean to go from Uganda to South Africa, but this to me I found fascinating when I went to the website. Mixed, is it MXIT? Is that how we pronounce it? Is the biggest social network in South Africa. And it's worth mentioning there's 40,000 new people joining every day. I mean, if that's not a business opportunity or any opportunity, I don't know what is. But on this site that we pulled up right here, which is their site, it says, it's a free online mobile chat and so much more. You can shop, as you said, use online social networking for money. But what really, really appealed to me is here it says, Mixit works on thousands of mobiles, old and new, making your old phone smarter. So it's appealing to people who might not have a smartphone, but can use it. The
buy-in, I think what's important to remember is every time you need to buy a new, whatever smartphone that supports the latest technology of these platforms, there's a growing disconnect there. So there should be a point of entry in these countries if they are going to create a platform that the point of entry is equal across the board, and then building in, like we talk a lot about cause marketing. I mean, I think there's a lot of corporations now that are interested in the cause space as well. It's not a very far divide for them to build in solutions for that area with the entrepreneurship activity that they're doing.
So this brings up a really good point, because you look at platforms like Mixit, I think they've got 27 million users, so that's a real opportunity. I want to talk now a little bit about this idea of causes, and we see so many causes being put out there online, get involved with this, get involved with that. It's like, let's send money to Haiti, let's walk to work, let's all raise awareness about this, January 25th, whatever it is. Azita, is there the risk that people will get tired? How can you possibly stay connected to so many causes at once?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in the last 2 years even, I remember when a few campaigns started, they got this amazing momentum only because they were the first campaigns to do that. And that very quickly, because the online space, we have to remember, it's not an offline, tangible build out, it's online, so it's easier to do. You can iterate quickly and anyone can have access. And because of that, a lot of micro movements have started. Now, have these micro movements necessarily resulted in actual change? We don't know, but because you can access them from a very surface level, a lot of people think that they're making an effective change by using social, by using this online kind of campaign, and that doesn't necessarily account to anything, which has led to a kind of a sense of fatigue in this space. Where did my money with Haiti go? Why should I donate, and where does it end up?
Yeah, so Vincent, I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, how do you feel like when people are moving into using social media platforms for so many different things, do you think that there's the risk that people can become distracted? I mean, there's 1,000 different campaigns, opportunities, products being marketed to you, and how do you differentiate what you're offering people and why they should get involved in the kind of project that you've developed?
It is a challenge. I mean, our entire business model is based on that one simple fact that people are going to create lots of social networks and lots of environments for causes. So, on the one hand, I think that when you get into it, and if you just sort of deep dive into social media for the first time, it's very overwhelming, and eventually you sort of figure out what it is that you're really going to back, and those become your sort of core things that you follow, whether it's causes being promoted on Twitter or however it works, I think at the end of the day, you know, it's a natural process of settling down once people get involved in social media for the first time. So it seems overwhelming, you know, and then when people get a little bit bored, I think eventually that's when they start really finding out what they're really interested in backing.
All right, Ahmed, I want to get one last tweet in from the audience.
Yeah, this is a comment that's kind of highlighting it all and talking about participation, making everything available to everyone. Mobile money solved the problem and provided financial services to the unbanked, which he's basically, Majiwader, saying is that lower income cadres had been neglected by commercial banks.
So basically, these people are being neglected, but social media is providing an opportunity. I want to thank you, Vincent and Roosevelt. Thank you, Azita and Ahmed. That's it for our show today. Join us at the same time again tomorrow. We'll see you then.